a call before. That is cool. I am starting all the calls though by saying I'm recording them all now. I know that we had big discussions around it. If anyone is not happy for them to be recorded or wishes to turn their camera off, please feel free to do so. They don't get posted on social media, but they do go unlisted in the YouTube playlist, and that's mainly just so the people that are in Future Leaders can access them. I don't publicize the links anywhere. And if after the call anyone really felt that something they said they wouldn't like to be on there, let me know, and I'll either not post it or I will cut a bit out. Fantastic. All right, so that is said. So we're going to do, because it's 2, 4, there's 8, 7 of us. Rather than a round robin, if anyone wants to just put their hand up for anything in particular that they'd love to just open a bit of a chat about. We're going to spend the first half of the call going through bits and bats, going through questions, and the second half of the call, we're going to open up really what the future and global impact of the IMF is going to be. So does anyone raise your hand, left or right, if you have anything that you would like to just throw into the mix that we can pick up later on? Or are we all good? See where it takes us? All right then, cool. So by show of hand then, what I'm interested in is who has no idea what the IMF is? One. All right, cool. Really doesn't know. Okay, I understand two hands means. And who is not aware, if the rest of you are aware of the IMF, who is not aware of the IMF making a big announcement in the last week?
I'm not aware what it was. I'm aware that something happened, but I have no idea what it was.
Okay, well, what the announcement was, Alan, was that the IMF said that if you called Alan, then you owe all of the world's credit. Everyone in the world owes you money. That's it. So we're on this call to basically understand how we pay you.
As of Sunday, there's one less that owes me money. It was a lovely surprise.
Okay, well, that's good then. That's really, really good.
I'm just going to mute myself because it sounds like the Harley's Angels are outside. Hang on. Okay,
no worries, Andy. So to fill in really quickly then, and for anyone else who knows a little bit about the IMF, it stands for the International Monetary Foundation, which has this word that it sounds like it's a global governmental body of some sort. And it is not. It is a private company. Let me just see who owns it.
Alan.
Alan doesn't own it, no. He should do, though.
Alan de Rothschild, perhaps.
That's it, Alan Rothschild.
This is where Alan tells us that's been his last name all this time. He's just...
I've been undercover.
Well, it's just... I'm trying to remember some of these names now. I can picture him.
But Alan's last name is an iPad.
No. I changed it. I changed it to go on cover.
Just checking.
Managing director is Crystalline. Oh, I didn't know she was the managing director. I thought she was just a spokesperson. So
George Soros got anything to do with it?
It's who, sorry?
George Soros, I think, or Soros, or however you pronounce his name.
George Soros is involved, but he's a like not a benefactor. What's the word I'm looking for? A contributor. So the IMF, because I'm really interested. Like, we're all probably aware of the fact that the Federal Reserve in America, is a private company and owns the control of currency and circulation, or providing currency to the government, just like the Bank of England. So everyone thinks the Bank of England is like part of England, but it's not. It's a private company. It's the central bank for England, and the Federal Reserve is the central bank for America. And then the IMF is like the World Bank. And again, it's a private company, and central banks work with the World Bank, they work with the IMF, and they basically control the currency and money supply around the world. And they don't have all the countries. They've got 190, something like that. It's 190 or 170 countries around the world that are part of the IMF, and they host every single year. They have a big meeting in Davos that's shrouded in a lot of not mystery, but it certainly doesn't seem what it is on the tin. And they say that people from all walks of life come, from big business to scientists to your run-of-the-mill people. But if you go and look at the people that actually attend this meeting, they are basically all the largest companies on the planet. And that's where you get like your George Soros link. So George Soros at Davos, this international meeting that they have where they discuss all global affairs, money related. And they say they set the agenda for what's happening in the future from an economy perspective. George Soros pays a lot of money to host a dinner there, and basically he gets the opportunity to speak to everybody and has in my opinion, a strong say and influence in direction, as well as understanding what's going on. So that's where I think the George Soros connection comes into the IMF. I don't think he's a formal part of it, but he may be like a partner member.
I'd love to have his brain.
You'd love to have George Soros' brain?
Yeah.
Well, I would, but only to tell everyone in the world what's in it and probably send him to jail. I think some of the stuff that Soros is linked with is
dubious.
Yeah, always has a lot of questions around it. Some of the companies that are funded by Soros don't seem to be very supportive of the world. But I think that's another call, another time for another call.
Supports a lot of these non-governmental organisations, doesn't he? That's what he's in.
I think if I was to summarize one aspect of what I'm aware of with George Soros, which I've looked into at least about 30 or 40% of what I'm to check what I'm about to say, and that is that a lot of the militias that are involved in different countries that are non-governmental seem to have ties back to being funded by George Soros.
I want to read his book.
Well, I'm sure there's a lot of good information. There's a book I want to read at the minute called Superclass, and that's what I'm interested in reading next, which is a guy who was linked with all of those people and then came out and then wrote a book all about this superclass that is above the elites, which is the sort of stuff that George Soros is in. So back to the IMF. So they have a big say in well, they are the say in global finance. And there you go, I'll switch across. See, get to use my fancy system. This is her. This is the woman who is the managing director of the IMF. And that's why one of the quick ways you can tell a company from an organization, companies would have chief execs and managing directors, whereas a governing body wouldn't have those titles. So anytime you're interested to find out whether a company is a limited company or not, and it's different country by country, but look at who's at the top and look at the title that goes with it. And it's usually a clear indication of whether it is a public serving company or a private serving company. And remember, if it's a private serving company, its number one priority is profits, because it is a company at the end of the day. So last week, does that answer enough of your insight, Kirsty? Thumbs up on your eating for what the IMF is?
Just say, I think it's worth saying that they act like a big overdraft for the world, but they kind of get involved mainly in developing countries where they've got some sort of systemic problem and financially, and the IMF comes along and says, we can lend you this money, but they've always got like very punitive kind of interest rates, terms attached to them. And they kind of they end up, there's quite an interesting explanation whereby some of the African countries that are resource rich, but they can't manage their exports properly, they get into financial problem, and they could solve their own problem internally, but because of the way the debt's set up with the IMF, they're just paying off the debt to the IMF rather than being able to sort their own country out. So the IMF's just quite predatory in terms of who they target and how they want the system to work to make profit, as you said. So
I would fully agree with that. And that's why it's easier to think of the IMF as a bank. I think the World Bank is a better word, but when people aren't used to thinking of banks as private companies or thinking of the people that make money as private companies, it kind of means nothing, the World Bank. But the world, this IMF, they lend money to central banks, and when central banks are going bust in a country, the IMF will lend money to a country. And then, as Richard says, as soon as you're lending money, that money is owed back. I'm just going to get my flask. 1 second, guys. Because life is not complete without a bit of tea or some wine. So last week, and I think it came out on Friday, and I encourage everyone to at least listen to it, and you can find it on here. I'll post the link in the crypto group just so that people have got it. Link to IMF
I don't know if you've noticed, but
blog.
in the International Monetary Fund, there's a little section for jobs. And if you click on jobs, it shows a picture of a really happy employee wearing goggles and holding a snowboard. I'm just saying, it looks like they have a lot of fun when they work for the IMF.
That must be
Oh,
in
yeah.
Davos.
Yeah, there probably is in Davos. Davos is in, it's always, Davos is the place, isn't it? It's not the name of the meeting.
Is it Switzerland? Davos, I think it's that way.
It's an alpine town in Switzerland. Yeah. There we go. So this is what they announced, and it was on the 15th, and the 15th was it was Thursday last week. And oh, 1 second, let me just mute that. Oh, okay. And so it's really interesting when we're only going to go through this a little bit, but it's really interesting to just pick up on the words that they're using. So first of all, it's titled, the whole thing is titled A New Bretton Woods Moment. So who has no idea what Bretton Woods was? Okay, so 1944, the World War II has ended, and basically the whole world is a bit of a mess, especially financially, and everyone's trying to work out like how to begin trade again. And because currencies had collapsed, this was when the IMF, it's either when the IMF formed or they had a big meeting. It was a big moment. It's called the Bretton Woods Agreement. And they met at a hotel called Bretton Woods. And they basically said, we need some stability with currency. And in 1944, what they said was they're going to use bring the IMF together, bring these people together and connect gold with US dollar. And that formed some form of trust so that people could use US dollar, but know it had some value behind it. So back then, we're all going to use US dollar, but it's all based on gold. And the reason they did that is because in 1944, America held like ridiculously more gold than any other country, which meant that if we're going to trade paper money and it needs to be backed by something, who's got the most stuff that we can back it against? And America had that, and that's one of the big reasons why we used the US dollar. So it was called the Bretton Woods Agreement, and that's when the US dollar became the global reserve around the country. Not to be confused with what happened in the 60s when Nixon said, oh yeah, you know how we said that for your dollar you're going to have the equal amount in gold? Well, we're not going to do that anymore. How and why he was allowed to do that is a completely another question, but that's what Bretton Woods was. So it was a really big moment because we came away from the sterling, which was the dominant currency before the war and during the war, and that's when we moved on to this new global reserve currency. So this whole thing that they're talking about here is a new Bretton Woods moment, which basically, if you consider the words Bretton Woods meaning a change in international reserve currency, going from something else to something new. That's one of the things that defined what Bretton Woods was. And it's a 12-minute video, and if you do anything in sales or psychology, there is so much hidden language within this to make it sound like it's really, really good. Lots of talk of brotherhood, lots of talk of sisterhood, lots of talk of moving forward. And if you've done anything in those sorts of worlds where you look at wording, it's just, it causes me, when I listen to it, more concern than anything else. But if you were just not aware of stuff and you listen to it, it would sound really, really, really positive. In fact, there you go. First section is all about sisterhood and brotherhood of humanity, which anybody would want. But what I want to bring attention to is they talk a lot about, or she talked a lot about, through coronavirus and through what's happening, we will lose 5% of GDP, global value across the world, and something like 10 million in loss of output. Everything's all, whenever you look at this, all about economy, like how much we're making, how much we're selling. She talks about, it's in this section here, they basically talk about giving what's the word she uses, relief packages. So I was going to retype this whole thing out, and wherever she says certain words over again, give you, in my opinion, what it really means. And all the relief packages is exactly what Richard was talking about earlier, that what the IMF's looking to do to help all these emerging markets, like down here, emerging markets, developing economies, is provide them with relief packages. And whenever you hear that word, all the relief packages is a loan. That's it. It says, here's some money, it's going to help you out, but as a return of that, you're going to pay a load of that back. And this whole section here says that we're coming together, we're all helping each other. But because of what's happening here, there you go, 4.4% smaller our economy will be, and 11 trillion of output will have been lost by next year. Which is affecting smaller countries. And so we want to offer them lots of relief packages to help them get back on their feet. At the end of that, this is verbatim what she says, word for word. She says, like, we must seize this new Bretton Woods moment. And it's a really powerful statement, like how they've titled it and where they're going with it, to basically say that that this is happening. But they're, in my opinion, seeding and planting that seed that a change is going to come, and we're letting you know that now. But the way it's written is, it's not that it might happen, this is happening. And this is the big thing that I really take away from this, is that sometimes you get information and you think, okay, well, that's interesting. I'll see where that will go and what will happen with it. But when I listen to this, like, I really take that as, this is really happening. And if you start to look at some of the stuff that Trump's saying, and you start to look at some of the stuff the ex-Bank of England guy is saying, Mark, I forgot his last name, they're talking about a big change is coming. Now, I'm not saying that these things are definitely what they are, but you start to see these little dots and you naturally begin to connect them. Because at the latter part of this call, I want to talk about what we can each do for ourselves and for the people in our communities. So where this fits into blockchain is they start talking about, one size does not fit all. Policies must be tailored to individual country needs. And they talk about understanding where a country is spending its money. Now, the only way right now for a country, for the IMF to understand where a country spends its money, is for that country to report back to the IMF. But if that country, if the money that's being given to the country as a relief is given through a blockchain, then every single space that country spends that money is automatically recorded on a ledger and is automatically available for the IMF. And I think that this change is not only around how we think about currency. Remember, we're splitting out those words, currency and money, because they're different. It's not only how we think about it, just like in 1944, it became about US dollars backed by gold, but it's also about how that money moves around the planet. And this is where I think blockchain is going to come into it, because I think they're going to do all this together. And if you're an XRP enthusiast, this is the big switch. And if you're just a blockchain enthusiast, then it's just a general big switch for crypto in general. Because it talks about we should move towards a greater amount of debt transparency. And remember, you're only going to get real transparency through something like a blockchain. And enhanced creditor coordination. And I take creditor coordination to be the ability for the IMF as a creditor to know who to give money to and when to give it to, and to give it to them fast, which again, you're only going to really do that through a blockchain. So the second part down here is basically around like giving more countries more money. There's a lot of information around digitization, and it's all angled around helping people get out of poverty. And you only have to look back at every country where the IMF has got involved to make a decision on whether or not the IMF has got a history in helping people get out of poverty. The last part of it, it's all around climate change. And I couldn't quite work this one out, but she's basically just saying that everything we're doing now also is around helping climate change, and it helps us to spend more money to help climate change. And I kind of just took this whole section as we'll help climate change. And if you're unsure of the IMF, then from this point on, it's okay because we're doing this really good stuff over here. And if you think climate change is a problem and you want to work towards climate change, then you're going to need the IMF to come in, because we're going to put tons of money into the market to help deal with climate change. All of it is around putting more money into the economy, which means more people will owe the IMF at the end of the day. So it's not the most like positive and happy of things to like fully open and discuss, but it's one of these things that's really, really, really big, and there's no way of making this smaller, and there's no way of trying to sugarcoat it, because I think more than anything, what she said has been really sugarcoated. We have to work through a process to make sense of it, unpack it, look at it, and go, okay, well, then how does this impact me? What can I do about it? And fundamentally, how will this change in money make a difference in my life? And I think these are the things when it comes to collective sense making that make the biggest difference, because the majority of the populace have no idea that that even got released. The people that do, half might be caring about it and half might. And there's a small minority who are seeing that as the beginning of something that's going to come very soon. And that's why I really wanted to kind of bring it up on this call, because I think it's going to impact a lot of things. And if you're into crypto, it's going to make crypto bigger. If you're not, I encourage people to get into it. But at the same time, it starts to look at blockchain being used on a big global scale. That's all I've got to say on it at the minute. I'd rather kind of open it up. If for people who, first of all, were not aware of it, how much did that make sense? And what immediate questions does it bring up for you? Anybody who was not aware?
I mean, I suppose with the IMF in place to help, as Richard was saying, sort of like struggling economies and things like that, with the implementation of blockchain, you wonder how they will distribute this. If that is the method of distribution they choose, is through technology and blockchain to distribute funds. In a lot of these countries, they don't have the technology to be able to, one, receive it, three, or two, use it. So I suppose that poses a question of how will they do that in those particular countries? Yeah.
So the way it's worth watching the Simon Dixon thing, because he talks through he plays the video that Daniel's talking about and then pauses it and says, "This is what this means." Yeah, he's brilliant, and he's been predicting this for years. And he said last, I saw an AMA with him last week that said this will happen in 3 years, and then on Saturday he put that thing out and said, "Shit, this is happening. I didn't think it was going to happen in 3 days." You know what I mean? And the difference is that because of coronavirus, and you can talk about whether it's a pandemic, all those different things, it's not just going to be developing countries. It's going to be developed countries, because the governments are just printing so much money. If you just look at the graph in America, it's just they've printed more money in the last 3 months or 4 months than they have in the entire last 10, 15 years. And so it's getting to the point where it's inflating just absolutely everything. And so the problem they got at the moment is it's the fiat system is going to die. It's dead. And the IMF know that. And so they've got to create something new to allow them to continue to be in the same position. And the way that people are saying it's going to happen is that if you look at America at the moment, they're still humming and ahhing about their stimulus check that Trump's holding back. Is it to the election? What is it to do with? Some people would say it's waiting for this to kick in, because if the way that the only thing that's popping up America and the world at the moment really is the American stock market, right? They're just inflating those assets to be able to keep printing more money, because the whole system is built on creating debt. If they don't create debt, all the money supply completely slows down. So at the moment, everyone is just not spending money. They're not able to spend money, but they're just thinking, I'm just going to start saving. So there's no money moving, there's no money flow, and velocity. So what they want to do is create the point where people are desperate for money, and this stimulus package might be this sort of like the carrot, basically, that says, okay, you're going to get your stimulus package, but we're going to have these Fed coins, Federal Reserve coins in America. And the Federal Reserve coin will be sat in a digital wallet. And then you go and access that digital wallet, and then suddenly you've got your stimulus package. So everyone thinks, well, that's relief. So they get $1,000 or something. That is the way that, the IMF will create this new system, backed potentially by the biggest countries that have got the most assets, like gold, whatever. Reprint digital coins and then distribute them to companies and people. But the thing with it being on a digital wallet is the amount of control that potentially allows them to have overspending, negative interest rates, voting, have you had a vaccine, all these other things, basically. So that's a scary scenario, and that's where it seems to be this is going to point to, because it isn't just going to be about developing countries, it's going to be about developed countries, because the fiat system is just going to go.
And to go back to one of the things that Bradley touched on there, like this, and it is an assumption that the less developed countries don't have this technological infrastructure. You've got to remember that. So there's I just looked it up. There's 190 countries that are part of the IMF, and I kind of got it wrong though. The IMF and the World Bank, they are separate, but I group them together, and I shouldn't group them together because they are separate. But all these countries that are involved, this money is going to, well, we don't know this yet, but usually money goes from IMF to a central bank, and then it gets distributed out from a central bank. So it's not that I, as a user, need to be connected to a digital wallet. What first happens is that there'll be an intermediary, like a central bank, or it will just go towards a digital version of a central bank, or let's just call it a country bank account. So then from that point, then it moves on to what Richard said there, whereby everyone in that country will have access, just like you've got a national insurance number, there'll be, let's just call it a national insurance number bank account. And rather than thinking that this bank account is attached to NatWest, to Lloyd's, to all these banks that you're used to, see it as either being attached to a country bank account, or maybe even the IMF. Like we just don't know what they're going to do here. I've read that they're just going to completely usurp central banks, and the IMF will literally just distribute money straight out, or it'll go through some sort of government. But what Rich is saying there is that all of a sudden, as a user, you'll know that if you download a particular app and you do KYC on that app, know your customer, so that you're verifying who you are, you're going to suddenly have access to a digital bank account. There's no bank, there's no sort codes, there's no, it's all done on your phone, which is going to suddenly take, what's the population of unbanked people? I mean, it's like 4 million, isn't it? It's 4 billion, sorry. Number of unbanked, just curious. 1.7 billion. So there's 1.7 billion, which is just less than 2/3 of the world that don't have a bank account. And these people rely on companies inside countries to create mobile apps, just mobile wallets. And you go to a shop and you give them a tenner and you top up your mobile wallet. All of a sudden, all these people around the world, us included, are going to have access to a bank account of a level playing field. You hear this term, level playing field, all the time. I mean, especially this year, like it's just constant. And that allows me to send money to a person who has a phone in a developing nation, direct peer-to-peer, rather than having to go through intermediary banks or anything like that. But in order to access that money, I will be using digital money, which means it's completely tracked and traced. And so you might get some people that say, well, I don't want to do that. So then you might have £1,000 in this digital bank account. You're like, no, I'm not doing that. But then that 1,000, 3 months later, goes to 2,000, 5,000. And at some point, it will reach a sum where you're like, I want to use it now. And so it's moving people away from electronic money into digital money. And at the same time, creating that full transparency. And that is both good and bad at the same time. And this is the awareness to begin to bring to things because it's going to come. And it's better to be aware of that now than suddenly find it being lamped on you and you clicking buttons without understanding from a sovereign perspective what it is that you're doing, why you're doing it, what the benefits are, and what the drawbacks are.
The other thing worth saying is one of the theories is that, like you said, the IMF will have a direct relationship to each country's central bank. I mean, normally the flow of money is IMF or World Bank, central bank, and then retail banks. And we all deal with retail banks. You might have your savings, or you got your wages going there, or whatever. And one of the theories is that your wages will have to be paid into the digital wallet. That's just the way it's going to go. So you can automatically get taxed. They can already do tax collection. But the other thing is, if you've got savings in your bank, your retail bank, HSBC, whatever, then these banks are all at sort of systemic kind of risk at the moment, where they can't manage their balance sheets and everything. And if people start to default on mortgages, all these sort of things that are potentially going to happen now, then the banks they're not going to be allowed to bail in and take your money. They're going to have to go bust. And when they go bust, they're going to go bust with whatever you've got deposited in the bank. And so one of the things is the IMF will go, it's cool, you had £10,000, your life savings in this bank account. Okay, it's over there now in this digital wallet. That's another way of creating adoption. So it will be wages, it will be taxation, it will be, you haven't lost your money, it's over here sort of thing. And all they've done is just invented a new way of creating money. It's just not fiat money anymore.
And that might be where they might produce negative interest rates in electronic money, but non-negative interest rates in digital money, which again is encouraging people to move it across. But they might not do that. They might also have negative interest rates in digital. But for as long as we've got negative interest rates, what they're really doing is encouraging you to spend. And that's not informing people and empowering people to invest. And I've recently stopped saying the word saving, because saving, most people think you should save money. And I rewatched all the Mike Maloney video. Well, I rewatched like the first 3 or 4. And if you've not seen his video on money versus currency, it's really something that you've just got to watch again, because it really opens your eyes to it. And you've got spending money, you've got saving, you've got spending currency, saving currency, and then you have investing money, or investing currency and swapping currency for money. And I think this whole thing that's going on right now is all it's going to do is reinforce people to spend their money, because if you try and spend currency, because if you try and save currency, the options aren't going to be there. The interest rates aren't going to be there, because it will deflate faster, or prices of things will inflate faster than the return that you can get, which just makes people earn and spend, which keeps us in this cycle. So to pop out of it is to begin to see money as different from currency, to understand what's happening with the digital wallets and be able to start siphoning off some of that into something.
It's worth watching. There's that Simon
I'm trying to
Dixon
find
one,
them now.
and there's also the George Gammon one. I think I shared them on Saturday, I think. That George Gammon is a bit more, it goes into more detail, but he whiteboards it out and you can kind of see the flow of how it's all going to work. I mean, it depends how far they go with it, but he's even saying that because they're worried about the velocity of money being spent, which is the only way they can keep printing more money to be able to profit off it, is that they might even, he's saying they would even put a timer on. So if you've got $1,000 in and you don't spend it in that month, they can actually start controlling where you spend it. So they can, every coin that's in your wallet will have a like a blockchain stamp on it, basically. So they'll be able to trace everywhere you spend. So you can kind of get to the point where you get the social credit system. So if you're going to spend it on booze, you might not get
-3 points.
Whatever. Do you know what I mean? Yeah, you'll start getting black spots by your name. But also that they can decide where you spend your money, because they'll literally be able to just lock it, lock the access to it, how you spend it, and all, if it gets that dystopian sort of level. But you just can see how it could creep into that way where you can end up with monopoly companies anyway out of the back of this, I think, anyway.
I don't think it's easy to see some of this as dystopian, but like money or the financial system has been moving to this for a long time. And I don't think that necessarily makes dystopia, but governments, the whole tax system is just been band-aided and band-aided and band-aided and band-aided. And it would take so many years for them to build a system to be able to bring all this together, whereas just moving all money onto something like blockchain makes it seamless and instant. And it produces loads of benefits, but it does produce things that we easily consider things we don't like. There will be people who think this is perfectly fine and wouldn't for a moment think there's anything wrong with a government understanding that you're being paid from here to pay your taxes. And there would be, well, I owe taxes and I don't mind the government seeing what I'm doing, because only bad people will be bothered about the government seeing where they're spending money. And that sort of narrative is really dangerous, because the privacy is eroded at well, it's constantly being eroded. But it's just like the whole mask thing, whereby someone showed me a picture the other day, and it's the first time I'd seen proper propaganda in the West for ages. And it had a picture of a person with a mask. And I'm not saying I'm pro or against masks or anything. I'm just sharing it as an image. And it was like, picture with a person with a mask. And he said, which one are you? The normal one, picture without a mask, the person who doesn't care about others, person with the mask with the nose coming out a little bit, said person who can't understand rules, and I can't even remember what the last one was. And I looked at it and I was like, wow. And it's polarizing those views, and it's going to happen within money as well and within finance. So I think that this all will happen. It has to happen naturally from a government perspective to move into a clearer system. But it's just beginning to understand that very easily you can just get sucked and pulled into it, just like downloading a piece of software. Click agree, nobody reads it, next. Oh, brilliant, I've got my $1,000 or £1,000 or whatever it is. But in doing that, I don't think there will be a lot of information for people to really understand what it is. All they'll think is, I already have digital money, what's the difference? And they'll just move across into it. And there is a phenomenal difference, especially if you care about privacy. So I think that's the big thing to really consider. And what I want to do just as we're moving across now into the latter part of the call, is just unpack any more questions around that, but also make sure that everyone on here can understand how and why that might impact them or people they know, and what you can do about it. Because if you know any people that get paid in cash, this is mega, like really, really big. So you might not get paid in cash, but you might know people who do, and the wind could be taken from under their sails very fast. without being aware of this information. So let's open up any questions on that.
What's the time scale on this?
Well, Simon Dixon thought it was going to be like 3 years, and he's no oracle, but he definitely is he's a person I certainly respect with his views and awareness of global money. And so he thought it was going to be 3 years, and he released that video a week ago or whatever, and 3 days later this came out. So nobody knows. Historically, the 3 biggest crashes we have had in the last 100 years all began in March when we look back retrospectively, and they all happened in October. And we're in October, right? A lot of people thought it was going to be yesterday, which would have coincided with exactly 33 years since the crash of 82. That doesn't make sense, does it? I'm not trying to work out the maths now. So we just don't know. But my personal view is it will be this year. I can't say it. All I can't work out is whether or not it'll be before the elections or after the elections.
Other than the obviously not very nice having the IMF, who are historically not the nicest of loan sharks. But other than that, them being in charge, because they've obviously been in charge of a lot of countries already, so they've already been in that position. So obviously this would give them a global access to doing that on a grander scale. So what's the negative impact of that?
Privacy. Do you mean negative impact to us?
Yeah.
Well, for me, it's privacy and the potential ability to control or influence you either through secondary force or through I'm not going to say fear, but imagine if you knew. So first of all, because they're digital, I could go and spend £1 now and it's a pound. I spend it in any shop and it's £1. But imagine if let me think of something that's practical. Well, we'll take alcohol just because it's real, but it's unlikely it's going to happen straight away. It cause an outcry. But imagine if all of a sudden when you went to buy alcohol, your pound was worth 90p. Or if something like Bitcoin came out tomorrow, let's just imagine everything that's happening now is in, but something big happens, you want to get involved in it. A government would have the right, or somebody would have the right, let's not use the word government, somebody who manages that blockchain would have the right to say, you cannot spend your money on that.
Yeah, I get that.
So you go to buy, and you physically can't.
I get that. Yeah, it's the freedom, the lack of freedom is on the roulette table.
Yeah, and right now, we'll be sold that based on your best interests. We'll be sold that in terms of looking after the people of whatever country it is, and the other big thing. That's why I brought cash up. Right now, all of us, no matter how well you try and do your tax returns, will have bits of money that come into your bank account, whether Fred's paying you back, or you did a job for someone, they give you whatever sum of money. You'll have bits of money coming in that probably don't go on your tax return because you just genuinely haven't accounted for them. If you are a person who has more of that in the future, that wouldn't, you've got no means to be able to do that, because for as long as there's an electronic system and a digital system, it makes sense that they will devalue this. So cash, if you went and paid £100 cash into the bank, it would only be worth 90 quid, 80 quid, which is encouraging you. They're not asking you to do it, but it's encouraging you to use the digital system and to say to somebody, oh, they'll say, can I pay you in cash? And you're like, can you pay me digitally? Now, they don't want to pay you digitally because they're holding cash. They want to pay you in cash, but you don't want to receive 90. You want to get the 100. So you want being paid digitally. So it's moving people into that system, which then has the full openness and transparency within it for whoever owns that chain.
So how does that affect the crypto world?
Well, my view is that it will make things like Bitcoin even stronger as a sovereign currency.
Nearly 12,000 today, right now.
Is it?
Yeah, just
Well,
kissing 12,000.
We're about to hit a big. Did you watch the one that said in 161 days after the last halving, we went up 500% or something like that?
Yeah.
So this week's meant to be a really big week. So as soon as something big comes on the market, like this, what the IMF is talking about here, it's going to make everything else that's more sovereign, that's more private, have more money before this comes into play. So all of a sudden, let's say that this digital world gets created, then everyone's got their money in cash at the moment. I believe that more money will be put into Bitcoin or other currencies and other cryptocurrencies before this gets too big. Now, can you bring that Bitcoin back into this digital world? Maybe, but if you do, they're going to ask the question, where did that come from? And that's why it's good to think about these things now, because if you're going to hold a grand, 10 grand, 100 grand in cryptocurrency over here, or gold or anything, and you haven't declared that, or it's not, or it's not known that you have that, and then you want to liquidate some of that and bring it back into this digital world, I think that's going to raise more questions. And if you're linking it to a Bitcoin address, and that Bitcoin address is already known to buy and sell Bitcoin and make loads of money, you will be immediately taxed on all of that.
Then how would you end up, how would you ever spend it anyway?
Well, you'd buy something in Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think this is exactly why Bitcoin was invented, 10, whatever, how many years ago it was. This is exactly why they did it, because it is the only cryptocurrency out there that's completely decentralized. It can't be controlled. There's a complete finite supply. So, I mean, the great reset that they're talking about with the IMF, they're sort of saying that the people that are going to decide on how this works, the countries are going to come to the table with, what have you got that you can give us to back this with? And it's going to be essentially gold reserves and the rest of it. Only those countries that have got those sort of sizable assets are going to be able to sit at the table and decide how it all works with the IMF. But there's a counter argument that says, okay, look, there's going to be so many countries that just are not going to get a look in on this, that they would start to look at Bitcoin as something that they can get positions on themselves and create this, you're going to potentially this kind of like divergence. So, that's potentially something else that some people are saying could happen. But it's exactly why Bitcoin was created, because it can't be messed with.
So some of the stuff that we're talking about, because it's not happened and it's not come in yet, like it is speculation, but it's educated speculation based on what we can see, and we can see this much of the jigsaw, and we're aware this bit's being created, so you can kind of speculately paint the rest of it. Because if the whole point of where we're moving to is that there's a big impetus to spend more, which then means if you've got these digital spaces and you want to put some money into gold, I don't think for now they'll say no to that, but there might be a limit on how much you can take out of this digital space and invest. There might be it might be a different value, and there's so many things that could occur. And so all I wanted to do by bringing this up is to bring awareness to the pieces of information that you might see moving forward, what they might mean, and to see that whatever narrative we're given, because if you listen to the IMF, I'd like if you can listen to it twice, listen to it with like, oh wow, and like it just sounds really positive and moving forward. But when you break it down and you're like, hang on, what does she mean here? It's a really fluffy sentence, but when you break it down, it's like, oh, we're going to offer these relief packages to help, and you realize that's just more debt. That's all it is, more and more debt to countries that are already crippled. And there's the two messages within it. So it's just about understanding that when all this starts to unfold, most people will just be led and followed along with it. And if you're aware of it, then you can still follow along with it. I'm not in any way saying don't open a digital wallet. Yeah, but I think in that video, the Greg video, I think the one you're talking about, Richard, he says, or Mike says in one of his, try and, if you're going to have these digital wallets, try and spend your money on things that do not really reveal your personality profile. Gas, water, electric, council tax, rent, these standard things that we all pay, rather than what you spend on Amazon and I don't know, coffees at Starbucks or giving money to other people or anything like that, because that's when we're handing over more of our privacy. So again, it's just, even just knowing that made me go, okay, that makes sense. I don't mind paying my mortgage. I don't mind paying my bills. It's seeing that difference between them. Going to spending your money at your shopping place, Tesco or Waitrose or wherever you spend your money, because they're standard, normal things that you would do.
But potentially it's also going to alienate a lot of people, isn't it? Because I know that even with my family and friends, if I chose not to go with a digital wallet and to keep money in other boards, have my wages to go straight through to something else, then potentially the family, the community, I'm already getting it on so many different levels, even by having an opinion right now. So I can't have an opinion. It's not allowed. It's so inflammatory out there at the moment that I imagine this is going to alienate people even more.
Yeah, people are going to speak to you, and you're either going to be
totally
okay with it, yeah, or as someone once said to me recently, you're either going to be a conspiracy theorist or a conformist theorist. And I like that, and it's like, and it's going to segregate people, because someone's going to be like, you're using cash, and you're going to be seen, in my opinion, you're going to be seen as the person who's dodgy. Why would you still be using cash? I don't get it. Like it's you're getting less money for it, and only people that don't want to be seen what they're doing use cash. And if you've ever seen, I read Aldous Huxley's Brave New World and years ago, and someone told me to watch the BBC series, so I watched it a few weeks ago. If you haven't seen it and you've not read the book, please watch it. But that's a whole populace of people who can't understand why anybody would want to keep anything private. And they engage with someone who comes from a traditional, like this sort of space, and they're like, yeah, but wouldn't you want everyone to know everything? And they're so used to that that there's no, they can't comprehend the opposite. And so I think that's one of the things to understand, because I feel part of my role is to bring awareness to privacy. I am not saying that we should all be super private, but I'm also not saying we should always all be super transparent, because whoever owns the ability to see that information has a lot of power, far more than we have now. And there's already too much centralized power. And I at the minute, as a core belief, I don't think that's beneficial for the raising of consciousness for humanity. I can't. There's a thing going on there, which is why having more people that you know now, helping them have awareness of things like Bitcoin and cryptocurrency in general, will educate people to make more informed decisions. Because it's just like Brexit. No one's thinking about the EU at all, and then all of a sudden we're asked to vote on something that's astronomically big, and the day after we leave the EU, the biggest Google search is, what is the EU? So we're a huge change is going to come that massively impacts the privacy of humanity, completely transforms the financial system, and 99.999% of people aren't even aware. They'll just be like, oh, I get a new bank account and someone gives me £1,000. It won't even be a thing to think about. And I don't think that is fair. I don't think that's right. I don't think it's just. So the more that we can have some awareness of it and begin to talk about it and let this just really settle in, that taking from what the IMF has said last week, like this is happening. This isn't how we should. Like I don't think they would release something like that without already having played at least the chess pieces. The moves might not have been made, but this isn't going to take them years to make. I don't to implement would be my take on it.
Am I right in understanding that China have already implemented or are trialing their own version, or if so, is there any kind of word on how that's being used? And I know they're already quite big on digital payments and stuff, but what's the kind of situation there? Is that IMF based, or is that purely Chinese government, or what?
So that's what we call a CDBC, a central bank digital currency. So that's nothing to do with the World Bank and the IMF, because it's a CBDC, central bank. So the central bank have made it. So the CCP of China, a Chinese Communist Party, have created their own digital blockchain, have made their own blockchain, and have already made a digital one. And I read last week, so the CCP own the largest petrol station company in China, and they've started to accept the digital yuan, and they want to have that rolled out by the end of this year to every single petrol station of theirs in the country. So they've been trialing it in one state, and they're seeing how that goes. And people literally drive up, fill their car. At the minute they tap something on their phone at the minute, but what it will be linked with, it will be linked to your reg. So you'll just drive up, fill your car, drive off. And in that single moment, you will have been debited the exact amount of money, and everyone will have been credited. And normally what happens with payments is there's a huge delay, because when you pay for something, that's very different from when it is not remittance, what's the word? Settled. And they're two different things. So just like right now, when you go into a shop, if you're a business, if any of you have been business owners and you use Stripe or anything like that, you'll know that when you take a Stripe payment, you might have to wait a week, a month, depends on what your deal is with Stripe, before you actually get the money in. So, but now, as soon as you're a shop owner and you're taking payments, as soon as you charge someone, the money's in your bank. And that's, again, that's revolutionary. So you think about cash flow from a business perspective. You're not having to wait all that time for monies to clear, especially if you're dealing with big monies. So China have done it. It's got nothing to do with the IMF. It does have an energy of fuck you, but that's what we're sold. So I don't know how accurate that is, but China have an aggressive strategy right now it would appear, to show the world that financially they are dominant. And where did these, in the Telegram group last week, I shared I did a lot of screenshots all in a one, and I'm going to get that video for, I think it was Bradley that somebody asked. And there's a really good one. And I just want to, in fact, I'm just going to quickly show this to you, because I screenshot that one because of literally, it was really powerful of what Ray Dalio had discovered. Give me a second. Here we go. Rough estimates, relative empires. Yeah, got it. New technology. How do I show this? Bear with me. Add a new layer. Telegram. Can you all see that? Yeah.
Just about.
Spotlight for everyone. Can you see that screen?
Yeah.
Cool. So I'll make it nice and big. So what he shared was that when countries are going through, can you see my mouse? Can you see my mouse as well?
Yeah.
Oh, that's really cool. So this is all the different ways in which you measure a country. So you've got here, you've got education, there's trade, innovation and technology, output, competitive, financial, military, reserve status. And what they found, and I tried to highlight them, as a country grows in its dominance, the first thing that grows is education. So do you see this? It's not really working for me. Let's try this. Draw. There you go. Can you see that? So this is education here, and that's the first thing that grows, and that's the first thing that happens to make a country begin to grow in its ability to be a more dominant country. Not a more dominant country, a stronger country. Secondary that grows up here, this is innovation and technology. So after education grows, innovation begins to come after that. Then a country starts to increase it. I'm going to guess that one is a financial center. And then this one here is its competitiveness. So as it gets more intelligent, it then starts to innovate more, its finances get better, and then it starts to become more dominant and more competitive across the planet. This one that drops here, that's competitiveness begins to drop. Military continues to rise. The red one, which is innovation, innovation begins to drop here. And I've got a color wash on my monitor, so I can't tell some of these colors, but I do know that this one here, right, which is a lagging indicator, is its reserve status. So that basically means that for this part of, over here, these are the natural things of a country getting better. So it's just more intelligent, it's more competitive, it's got more innovation. But then as they all start to decline towards the tail end of the country on a decline, the last thing to fall is its reserve status. This is the same for every single country that we've got information on that's ever been. And this is where this is where they pull this information from. So then when you start to look at China, how do I get rid of all of those? Cancel. So when you start to look at China, China's education has been going up and up and up for years. Its competitiveness has been going up. Its finances have been going up. And where's innovation? Innovation has obviously been going up to the point where we're somewhere around here. When we look at America, America is also, well, America is probably somewhere more around here. And America has obviously held the status as the most dominant, most advanced country that we've had for years. So what's happening now is a shift in terms of who's in charge. And the last thing that happens when a country is growing is its reserve status, which is here. It's the last thing that grows, because basically, and it makes sense, a country must kind of prove itself to the world that it is a good country. It must sustain, its education. It must sustain its innovation. And when it does that, the global reserve starts to rise. And so to go back to Paul's question, we're at a point where China is now financially showing dominance around the planet. It's financially making itself known to people that we have a strong currency, because for years it's been considered a weak currency. We have a strong currency, and how do I get rid of that? We have a strong currency, and sorry guys, I've got way too much. There we go. And we want the world to know that, because we want the world to see our strong currency and maybe use it more, because other countries won't have the same sanctions that the US has. So does that give like a good enough bit of information for Paul just around where China's up to with its digital currency?
Yeah, all good, thank you.
Super duper. Let me just unspotlight that.
They also want to be you know, well, like you said, they want to become they don't want the dollar to be the reserve currency anymore, do they? So they've got all the gold and they've got their own Bitcoin as well. So they're absolutely hedged, whereas America's got a lot of gold, but no, not as much, and hasn't got as much bargaining power anymore.
China has got, compared to the rest of the world, China has been buying gold for since like the 70s and the 80s, astronomically. In the last 10 years, China's bought shitloads of gold. America has some of the least gold on the planet for like developed nations. And that's why this thing the IMF is talking about, a new Bretton Woods, whereby we will renegotiate what it means to have currency. Because currently, currency has got no value behind it. Someone once said to me, oh, well, what's so good about Bitcoin? Bitcoin has got no intrinsic value, which means, you know, if I have it, it's not, gold's gold and we can go out there and I can touch it and do something with it. And I said, well, fiat money has no intrinsic value. The only thing holding fiat money up right now is belief. And I don't know who said it, but they said that currency is the greatest magician's trick that we've ever had. So that's the only reason we think pounds and dollars have value is because we think they have value. They're just papers. And if you want to see that as proof, you go back, and it's in one of Mike's videos, the last 600 currencies that have ever been recorded all went to zero. We've never had a currency ever not go to zero, meaning zero in value. So the US dollar is not excluded from that. And that's why in 1940s, 50s, what you could buy for $1 compared to now, the purchasing power of that dollar is peanuts. And you think about how much a chocolate bar was when you were 15 years old, 10 years old. Like I remember chocolate bars being about 25p. Now they're about 80p. But nothing's changed. And so we think that a pound's still a pound, but it's not a pound, because I don't get as much for that pound. So although we might not have had like, what was it, Greece or Cyprus took 10% of money out of everyone's bank account to pay for their debt, and everyone went crazy. Britain's no different. Like, we've had about 10% inflation in the last 10 years. In fact, we've had, well, I don't know what Britain's is, but I know in the world, if you look at the G8, the biggest countries on the planet, in the last 10 years, the amount of currency in circulation has gone up 100%. So 10 years ago, there was £100 worth of notes in circulation. Now there's £200 worth of notes in circulation, which means that the total value of the money that we had has just been halved. So our money is being eroded all the time, but we don't even see it because inflation happens so incrementally and slowly that you just get used to it. The price of bread goes up, the price of milk goes up. So I think seeing all of that starts to lift some of the veils from the eyes, and the aim is to then empower you to go, right, well, what am I going to do about that as a result?
What am I going to do about that as a result?
I'm going to open that up because I've been talking for a long time, but my answers are fairly ubiquitous every single time. Anybody want to take an answer?
I would like to know what everyone thinks. Everyone, all of you.
Not a specific answer as such, but probably another question. What percentage of if you're talking about Bitcoin and it being a hedge similar to gold to protect yourself, I suppose, for inflation, not crypto, Bitcoin specifically, how much do people have as a percentage in Bitcoin as a hedge, similar to what they would have in gold as a percentage of a portfolio?
So, well, to quickly answer Kirsty's question, because it comes onto yours, for me, gold, silver, Bitcoin. I'm the same as what what's Rich Dad called? Kiyosaki talks about. Pretty much anyone that's into liquidish investments would say gold, silver, Bitcoin, and gold and silver, because over the course of time, they have always been a store of value, long-term store of value. And I put Bitcoin in there because I think it's just going to allow people the ability to hold it as well, because most people gold requires you to actually store something, and most people can't even afford gold anyway. So as soon as we say gold, unless someone's got at least a few hundred in savings, and that buys them 1/10 of a coin. So gold, silver, Bitcoin. But there are other assets as well. But when you start looking at things like the stock market, well, the stock market is based on US dollars or pounds, which means it's based on a currency. And if the currency devalues, the value of the stock devalues. You could say the same for property, but at least with property, you've got something. Now, what people are willing to pay for it might completely change. I know people that have got property in South Africa that was worth fortunes, but when the rand went to zero, they're literally like, they don't want to sell it because what they'll get for their house is not worth it. But they still have intrinsic value. They still have a house, but they can't swap that house for something of value because the market's so poor. So property can still be a hedge, but it's still kind of linked to money, to currency, sorry. So gold, silver, Bitcoin. And to go to Bradley's question, I think it comes down to your risk. I obviously this is not none of this is financial advice. I should probably always start the calls like that. But I always recommend to people to at least have a third of their crypto portfolio in Bitcoin, to give you an idea. And I wouldn't ever say go less than that. And I'd say go more if you want to be safer. If you want to be a bit riskier, then I'd say go less, because likely all the other altcoins will X better than Bitcoin, but I think Bitcoin is the safest by far than all the other coins.
Yeah, I mean, I've started to see that probably more recently, more than anything, where there is not a bear market. Well, we have been in a bear market, but when there's a bit of a downturn in the market, Bitcoin never goes down as much as the other coins do. So like my account bleeds heavily when like it goes down because I haven't got too much Bitcoin and I've got more. I mean, the majority is like 40% is like XRP and stuff. I'm just waiting. So I just holding strong over the years, but like I'm just trying to have a look at it and move some money about because I'm just too heavily skewed towards certain more riskier projects, I suppose.
But you're also really young though, so just you know your risk strategy can be totally different from someone who's in their 50s and 60s because you've got time. You can make more mistakes. So go on, Richard. What were you going to say?
I can't remember now. I can't remember what I was going to say. I think that what everyone does, I mean, if my strategy will be I do the same 30 gold, silver, Bitcoin. Of my portfolio, Bitcoin has been the biggest accumulation. So it's the biggest percentage of my portfolio at the moment. I've got some altcoins, but my intention will be when the altcoins pump, or I've got an exit strategy for the different altcoins, it'll go into Bitcoin. You know what I mean? That's just what I'll do. I think, like you say, is it risk how you look at it? Because I think, like what you said earlier, Kirsty, is like, well, you can have a choice to spend digital pounds or whatever it is over here given to you by the IMF, or you've got your Bitcoin and potentially another ecosystem emerges where Bitcoin it is like the reserve currency of crypto, and it's the alternative. And the hardest thing to get your head around is that Bitcoin is still going to be worth a Bitcoin, like you said, Dan. You know what I mean? It's going to have an intrinsic value, and
like an ounce of gold.
The hardest thing at the moment for everyone is that you're looking at the price of Bitcoin. I'm going, it's worth $12,000 now, but so what? It doesn't kind of almost doesn't matter. Do you know what I mean? It's the same as like having a gold coin or whatever. It's like, it's only worth what that's worth. It's not worth the fiat. And that breaking away our minds from that is quite difficult at the moment because we're still in this ecosystem where we're dealing with pounds, and you need pounds to live and spend. So that's a very hard thing to sort of wrap our heads around, I think.
And to go back to what Bradley was, just to give another view on it for splitting your money up, because I always just look at my crypto portfolio, but now what I try and do is I'll do a net cash analysis of going like, what are the things that I own and what are the values of those things? And I also include technology in there now, because by doing that, I managed to sell a lot of tech and transfer that money into gold, silver, and Bitcoin. So try and look at everything that you own that's got value, decide whether it appreciates or depreciates, decide whether you need it, and then decide whether or not it's worthwhile moving it into something else. So like, there is a person that's on this call, because it's recorded, I'll keep it private, who has stocks. And they were making a decision on, should I sell some of these stocks and move it into crypto? Should I sell some and have it liquid to be ready for the dip, to buy more at the dip, or should I move it into metals? So and these are all existential questions that you can only ask of yourself. So if you've got some property, what's the equity in that property? But also understanding that that equity is only there for as long as the market holds itself. Do I have some money in metals? What percentage of my money is in metals? And then when it comes to crypto, how much is in crypto? And then of that, how much of that is Bitcoin? So, I think that only by taking stock of those questions can you then go, okay, cool. So this is where I'm at. And you might suddenly go, oh, I've got a bit in Bitcoin, but actually I don't have anything in gold. All right, cool. Well, I'm going to use the Revolut app, and I'm going to put £5 a week into gold. And when I've got 200 quid in there, I'm going to sell that and buy a gold coin. And that way, all you're doing is you're creating a strategy that begins your own self-empowerment, moving you towards a percentage of money that you're happy, and moving it out of currency. Does that give? That was my view on anyway.
Andy's dying to ask a question.
Oh, I can't see. Where is my screen's changed and I can't see any hands.
Andy.
Now I can. I had the wrong button on. Andy, then Kirsty.
Going back to what you were talking about, what, 20 minutes ago? I don't know how long.
Sorry, have you had sorry, right? I literally haven't seen Andy since I pressed that video thing.
It was just about, when you were saying about the value of a pound is about 90p now, and then it's going to be 80p and so on and so forth. It brought back to mind what happened in Hungary I don't know, two decades back. They used to have, a bit like we have the pound and the penny, they used to have the forint and fillere. And with inflation, there is no longer the fillere, everything's the forint now.
Wow.
Back in 2013, they actually repaid the IMF. There were people out on the streets, they couldn't repay the mortgages and whatnot, so properties were taken back off them. All sorts of people were living in the ditches. It was just wondering how long we've got before the penny is defunct.
Don't know. I think I don't know if you're on that call, we talked about decimalization day, 1982, when we went and we created the decimal. Currencies changed all the time. So at some point, will we just have a pound? Quite possibly. I mean, how long and how far inflation will go, I have got no idea. But I tell you now, there is no sign of money stopping being printed. No sign. But so much stuff is pennies at the minute that I would imagine we're a fair way away in the UK of not having pennies. But I don't know. But your story just illustrates.
That's what Hungary thought. Yeah, I mean,
how long did that take? Do you think?
Of time, I would probably say about 3 years.
I'm sure there was a discussion about not long ago whether they were going to continue to make some coins. I can't remember. I'll see if I can.
They were going to drop the penny.
Yeah,
I remember them talking about it.
Yeah, it was not long ago.
I think one of the things that someone talked about once on one of the videos was that I can't speak for everybody about that, but I have got no frame of reference of inflation. I can't tell you of a Great Depression. I can't talk to you about the story Andy just talked about. As far as my life is concerned, I have had pounds and pennies my whole life. They've always been pounds and pennies. And until I really learned about spending power, things have never changed. You just think people are getting greedy and they've upped the prices. A chocolate bar is 30p, used to be 25. You don't think that's inflation. You think that's someone putting their prices up because they want more money. So my whole life, everything's been normal. So for me to take what Andy just said then and imagine that in a 3-year period, prices could go up so much that nothing was a penny, that it was pointless having a penny. I've got nowhere in my brain to put that.
It got so bad that we were being asked to send over coffee, just a simple jar of coffee, something like the equivalent of 10, 15 pounds of wages over there for a jar of coffee that we were paying maybe what, £1-2 for.
Yeah. So and that's the thing that hit me, that all of this stuff, when people talk about, you know, Great Depressions and people being on the streets like en masse, I can't get my head around that. And I don't actually want to believe it. And I like to think that actually that won't happen. I think this whole digital thing the IMF's talking about, this is the silver lining with it. I think that will be part of the savior, but that saving hand will come at a price, and that price will be privacy. And I'm not here to say whether that's right or wrong, but
the problem with the IMF and what happened in Hungary is that can't remember, the prime minister or the president, one of the two, decided that they just wanted to pay the IMF back early. So they basically, that's why a lot of Hungarians ended up in this country at the time and said that they were so ashamed of being called a Hungarian, because they were just basically turfed out of homes by the way the government handled things. It was August 2013 that they made this early.
I'm just looking at it now. Did they do that by printing loads of money? Because that would have made sense why they
I'm not
value
sure.
went down loads. I think can't tell. Okay, be really interesting to find that out, because if they printed a load of money to pay the government back, the IMF back, that would have done so. But then by printing loads of money, the value, currency, so ingrained in my mind, by printing loads of currency, the value of that currency gets diluted.
Yeah,
it's fundamentally what inflation is. Kirsty, do you want to have a final question? No, all good. So to summarize, the people that generally control financial policy around the world are talking about making a big change to that world. In my opinion, and it's only my opinion, it's going to happen, and that is going to have some really good things, I hope. Well, it would seem, but it's also going to come at a price, and everyone being aware of that will allow us to begin making decisions today, whether that's £1 and that's all that you can invest into some money, or whether that's 10 grand, it doesn't matter. But starting to see that today will I hope this is an impetus, a catalyst to whatever you were thinking of maybe doing. Maybe this will be the thing that makes you go, I'm going to do it more. And if you haven't spoke to a few people, maybe you might speak to people a little bit more, not to worry them or scare them, but it's just to this whole blockchain thing and this whole crypto thing is not going away. Like it's completely changing the world, and that change could be coming far sooner than we think, and it will be sugar coated, like anything that comes from governing bodies, but has within it a lot of other implications that we should all be aware of. Before we leave, is anybody got any final questions, or does anyone? I know it's a heavy call. There's no way of kind of mincing around it, but it's also a really opportunistic time. Kirsty?
I've got one final question. So because I work for the Conservatoire, I've got a feeling if anything like that came in, then it would come in block, wouldn't it? It would come like, the university would make a decision, not that we would get to make a decision. It would be like the whole university is moving to being paid in this way. I'm guessing.
Yeah, I would imagine so.
Yeah, and if that was the case, then me as the sovereign, amazingly, incredibly inspirational being that I am trying to be right now, which on most days I fail at, but me who's trying to be that person, how could I then step into a position where I can do something about that and not just go, okay, well, I'm going to leave the job then?
I'll answer and give thoughts if you cancel delete what you just said about yourself.
I cancel delete what I just said about myself. It's the end of a very long day.
I know, and I'm sure you've done your best today, and I bet you do today. You were the creative, wonderful sense that you aspire to be every day.
Phenomenal today.
Doesn't mean we always make it, but we aspire to be it.
I was.
Yeah,
the university potentially is going to do that. So what can be done?
Well, first of all, I think we're all in that same boat. Like it's likely, inevitable that all money in the UK at some point will transition through that system. That's I can't see how and why that wouldn't work, because as soon as half of your suppliers are paying you, and as soon as half of your employees or people want paying in it, and you're trying to operate in this cash, they're going to make it so difficult in this world, but so much easier in this world that we'll just transition. So the latter part of your question was like, what can I do about it? Is that what you said?
Yeah, what can be done? Like choice-wise, like if that was to be put into play, is it like you were saying before about people having a digital wallet? If you're actually involved in something like that at all, then would we have the opportunity to be able to go, okay, well, I'm just going to use that just to pay for these things, but I'm going to keep I'll keep my Bitcoin. Amazingly, Ray only has Bitcoin. He's been very insistent that this is my 6-year-old, very insistent that he didn't want anything else. And even like recently, I was like, come on, I'll get you some Polkadot. Or why don't you pick one of these names? He went, Mummy, I just want Bitcoin. Done.
So think of it like this: they're two different ecosystems. Yeah. So if you get paid in here and you want to spend the money in here, if you've got money over here, whatever that might be, Bitcoin or something else, that can operate in here as well. You'll only be able to pay people that can receive it.
Yeah.
But you just keep them separate. And I would, as soon as possible, we'll know when it happens, begin to understand how can I move money from this system to this system?
Yeah.
What are the implications of that and everything? But from this point on, from today, all of you, and there's only a handful of us on this call, you all have a choice to begin to look at where you move your money and spend your money and invest your money before all of this change occurs. And that is a period of time that most people won't have had, because when it happens, it will just happen. I'm conscious of time. If anyone needs to leave, you feel free to leave, but Andy's got a question.
Well, not so much a question, it's just something else to put in there
Okay.
For anybody that's businesses, self-employed and whatnot, that tax returns are going to quarterly, aren't they? So
yeah, does that begin next year?
With getting the money out of you.
Is that from next year, Andy?
Phasing it in, I'm not sure. That's why they brought in all this QuickBooks and Xero and all these different apps for doing your accounts.
Self-assessments going quarterly. I'm just gonna.
What does that make you think, Andy?
It's just they're trying to get people to pay up front before they've even earned the money. They're wanting 6 months up front. So if you're putting in quarterly accounts, then they're expecting you to pay. So you're 6 months in front with your tax.
Which breaks down even more of the smaller businesses.
Yeah.
It's from after April 2020. Yeah, it started this year, but I think that means that next year, the first quarter of next year, you'll be charged the tax from the first quarter of this year. No, it doesn't make sense. Well, it's definitely not now, because I'm doing my 1920. Yeah, no, it is. So it's because it says here after April 2020. So I don't actually know. In fact, Kathy is on the call, but Kathy, do you have any answer on that, or would that be more Howard's thing? Sorry if I put you on the spot there, Kathy.
You're all right. You're okay. I'm not sure really. I don't know is the answer. Howard's not on the call. He's somewhere else, so I'm not sure.
Ask
I've
Howard.
Not heard anything from the. I've not heard anything from our accountants, and usually they're putting on the ball, just like keeping you updated with that kind of stuff. But I'll I'll check that out, because.
I only know that because I do the bookkeeping for a friend of mine for his business, and he ended up having to pay the full year of tax, plus then half again because they wanted that 6 months worth up front. So he basically ended up paying 18 months worth of tax.
Oh no, hang on. Here's the answer, and I'm on HMRC's website. At the moment, there is a pilot scheme to work out how exactly this quarterly reporting will work in practice. It appears, however, it may be subject to change, that the bill will still be paid at the end of the year. However, you have the option to pay it throughout the year if you would prefer this. This is the current stance from HMRC.
That's different to what?
But we'll definitely have a like. I'll do some digging on that because I'd heard it at one point, and it made sense the government would do that. This is 1 year old from HMRC.
It's just that I've got his bank statements and everything, and so I know he was paying something like £700 a month over 3 months just to get, you know, because that's
yeah.
what.
But he could have been paying that as a HMRC debt and paying it off. So if you deferred it, no, I've been doing his accounts for I don't know how many years now. So there was no debt. Somebody else was doing his accounts before me. So he was paying tax on that. He's not the type of person to get in arrears with it anyway. Well, I'll definitely do a digging on it because I'm always curious about stuff like that. But like, yeah. I think if it was coming in properly, it would be everywhere. A bit like when they made VAT digital, like it would be big and bold because everyone would have to get a lot of affairs in order. So I don't think it's coming like soon, but as soon as the blockchain's in something like this, your tax would just be, well, as a human being, as a self-employed person, it would be taken out. Sorry, as a PAYE person, it would be taken out. But as a business, you still need to file. But I'm conscious of going over too much time for everyone. I always try and respect time. But I am interested in that, Andy. So we'll do some digging on it. So ponder where you're at, guys. Ponder what you've got. Ponder what you can do. Ponder where you're, how this impacts your world and where you're at with it. We always say on every single call, like if you can begin to start siphoning off bits of money to invest into money, not currency, and if you're holding cash, then just really think about that. Is devaluing itself, and there are things you can move that into. Celsius being one where you can earn more in interest than you will in inflation. So at least you're hedging if you do need to keep it in pounds. So there's plenty of things that you can do, but just keep your ears and eyes open for what's kind of coming and what's being said by the government, because I wouldn't be surprised if we start hearing more information soon. As ever, if you've got any questions in our new Telegram group, you're welcome to post them. There's not loads of us in there. If you've got some other people that you think would value these conversations, please do share it across to them, bring people in, and let's just open up these conversations more, because the more
Can I ask a quick question?
Of course you can, Kathy.
Thanks. The information shared, I mean, this has been brilliant. Thanks so much. But it gets very noisy in the groups, both Telegram and the WhatsApp, and there's some great stuff being shared. Is there any way that, I don't know, Daniel, that you can start sort of having different threads, or you're probably already doing that? It just strikes me there's so many different aspects of this that are really important. You know, there's what you want to do as a human being in this world, a conscious human being. You know, what are the things that are right? There's all that side of things, and then there's the sort of financial bit in terms of what you know, what will serve you in your kind of life in terms of those things that are important to you. And then there's the how you kind of go about it. And for somebody like me, it gets really confusing. There's so many different threats, and it's easy to get lost in it. I'm sure I'm probably not on my own in that. And so it seems that if you have threads and maybe paths through this, that could be enormously helpful. I'm just sort of voicing that now, just as a
I would love, like, I feel that fully, and that's one of the reasons we split the WhatsApp group. Just because the two biggest conversations was basically money stuff and worldy stuff. The only answers I've been able to come up with is a Discord or a Slack channel. And the only reason I hesitated with that is because as a bridge community, like helping people from the normal world of everything to then discussing these things, if I start saying anything other than WhatsApp, people's heads blow off. Telegram, like we got of the 70 people in Thingy, we got 29 that came to Telegram. Discord and Slack, I'm scared that it will be a barrier for people. So I hear what you are saying, and if other people have got, first of all, by show of hands, do you feel and agree generally with what Kathy's saying there, that even having those two? Yeah, okay.
You know what, Daniel, it might be really good just to have another Telegram group just for what's being said on this call, where it's just the IMF thing and the digital thing and the, oh my God, I've just had deja vu really full on. Yeah, it might be good just to have a group just for all the stuff that we've been learning today and everything that's coming with that, and just split so that you've just got the Telegram group that's all financial, but there's one that's just, this is where we're at right now, potentially.
What, and then use that call to put more information so that you have a Telegram call just for the comments about the call?
Yeah, a Telegram just about the IMF stuff and government stuff that's happening right now.
Yeah, but then there'd just be another group. There'd be another call where something's just as important. Like I'm trying to not have too many things. I mean, the real answer sometimes is like, Kathy, do you mean to be able to continue the conversation, or do you mean to understand a pathway forward, like almost like a little mini course on what to do with this? I think,
Daniel, that's exactly the thing. I think it's like, how do you navigate your way through this? And I think that could be a conversation, maybe not for now, but some thoughts for everyone to think about, because if you've got ways to actually navigate yourself through these different aspects, that could be enormously valuable, because knowing where to start and on which bits to start with, it can be really quite difficult, but that could provide huge value for everybody.
So I do have an answer for that. Well, my current, because I've been thinking about this for a while, the number of times we've answered basic crypto questions, whilst I love doing it, I do think if people just went through a couple of videos, it would help. And I've sectioned off a part of my new site that I'm building for myself on Zenler to have a load of free courses. And all of these calls will be booked through Zenler, so that all the calls are there and we can tag them, and I can put timestamps on really easily as we're through the calls. And I can very easily create dead easy content, even if I just cut bits of these videos. So we can just say, this is as a collective group, almost using sense making to make sense of how we move forward. And if it's just a short little bit of something and it doesn't need to be polished, then someone has a way forward. So that is definitely going to happen. Obviously, like, only because I'm leaving the country at the minute, it's not priority. But at some point, I am going to have to move across to that, because these calls are really useful. But I do get off them sometimes and think, was everyone on that call now in a space to feel more empowered to do something? And I can't always answer yes to that.
Yeah, it's great that we're having the discussions anyway. But for each one of us, I guess we're all at different points, and well, points is the right word, but we each have different life experience, and where we'll pitch in with that will vary for us, I guess.
I think every time we talk about something, we bring awareness and solve something. But as soon as we do that, we just naturally create a problem. Because, if I show you a problem, well, that's great. But now your brain goes, well, what do I do next? And you're at level B, and someone else is at level X, someone else is on -2. We're all just all over the place. So I fully hear you. I really do. It's not a new problem I'm trying to solve. So I may, especially if you give me a nudge, maybe this is what I needed, because I am surrendering more to the universe. Thank you, universe, for bringing me Kathy's comments. And so maybe that it will get made sooner than you think.
I think just ask questions as well, Kathy. I think everyone here at some point was in exactly the same point, where it all sounds like, complete Greek. You know what I mean? It's like no one really. Everyone's come to it at this point, and at the start of lockdown, there was a couple of us here, and then it's just sort of grown from there, and we've sort of organically helped people through it, I think. So I think it's just a question, just ask questions. I think everyone can vouch for that here.
My mind goes in so many different directions. Just listening to this call, there's been about a million things I wanted to say, but I think just shut up and listen, because I've never took part in one of these calls. There's so much I don't understand, but then there's also some things I think I could share, which might be useful as well, and it's just, there's so much of it. Where do you begin, but I'm sure that's yeah, that's the point, isn't it? It's about helping each other, I guess. You know, Daniel is, you know, is incredible at what, you know, bringing this group together and enabling all this.
We just need to start somewhere. Like
Yeah.
the number of times, like even splitting the groups off sometimes, I was like, you can't split worldly events from finance. Like they're just so ingrained and entwined. But to have a conversation, we have to kind of pick this bit here and then start to talk about it. But then every one of these calls, just if it was a mind map, I mean, this was just about the IMF. That's it. In theory, this was the most single topic call we've had, but we covered so much stuff. So I don't think there's an easy answer to it. All we can do is just keep kind of moving forward and building this out. But I will say that even though the more people we have, the more noise there is in the groups. On the one hand, on the other side of it, the more that as a collective group, and I watched that Daniel Smachtenberger video again today, the transition one. Like I encourage everyone to watch that because it really explains what collective sense making is. And that's what I'm trying to reach a point of, where we can bounce things around so that at the end we all kind of get to an agreed space. Agreed's maybe the wrong word, but a space where we all can look at it and go, I can see that. And that is fraught with all sorts of challenges at the minute. So let's see where it goes. But as Richard said, do keep asking questions, and I can't stress this enough. There is no such thing as a silly question or an early question, or even if you think it's been asked before, ask again, because if I don't have the time to answer it, on a couple of calls ago, we had Elaine and Alan answering questions for other people because they wanted to express that teaching to somebody else, because then it doesn't come from me and then I can see that they've learned it. So keep going with it, but I do hear you fully. And if you've got 10 hours a week and you'd like to contribute that towards me, I would receive that time fully.
Thank you.
There's a joke, don't worry. All right. Thanks, guys, for staying a bit longer as well. I hope you all have a wonderful week. I do reiterate, I want you to see all this change as an opportunity. Just remember that, even if it can feel a little bit unsure, look, every time something major happens, I don't like the guy, but Dan Penner has famously been saying now, this is the greatest transformation of wealth the world has ever seen, ever. Buy bits of gold now. It's $2,000 an ounce, but it could easily be at 20 grand an ounce. In the next few years if we move across to a gold currency. So there's massive things that you can do to just move some of your money from pounds and dollars into money. And that's what I mean about opportunity, because what's coming is going to impact us all. What you do today will change how much of that moves from a pain to a pleasure, from an opportunity to a cost. That would be my parting words for this. All right.
Thank you, Daniel.
Welcome everybody.
Thank you,
Thank you for showing up.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Go in peace. Have a wonderful week, and I love you all. Take care.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Bye.